Welcome to this episode of the Caucus Corner. Each week, we bring together legislators and New Yorkers to discuss some of the most pressing issues from the perspective of people of color. I am your host, Assemblymember Mikhail Salaj, Chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. Our theme for this year's legislative session is agency and action, a principle we must embrace as we continue to face challenges from an antagonistic federal government. As legislators, it is our duty not only to safeguard our communities, but also to empower New Yorkers with the tools that they need to protect their families and access new opportunities. New York has long stood as a beacon of hope and opportunity for immigrant communities worldwide, a legacy that's embodied by the enduring image of the Statue of Liberty and of regular New Yorkers living their lives. As the federal government executes their plan to roll back civil liberties and target immigrant population, it's more important now than ever for New York to take a strong stance to uphold our values and protect our residents. These actions are harmful and they threaten the well being of our neighbors and our families. And the caucus calls on all leaders to safeguard the civil rights of all New Yorkers and ensure that we remain a state of refuge, fairness, and dignity for all. Let's jump into our episode where we're going to be talking about immigration, which is an important topic, especially for New York being the beacon of hope when it comes to immigration. And I'm joined by two of my great colleagues. I want to first give it to the chair of the Task Force on New Americans from Brooklyn. Is Brooklyn in the house?
Yes, Brooklyn is in the house. My name is Farah Sufra Flores. I am the assembly member for Brooklyn's greatest neighborhoods encompassing Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Crown Heights, and Bed-Stuy. And in addition to being the chair on the Task Force of New Americans, I'm also Haitian. My family comes from Haiti, and I'm excited to be here.
Next, we have our great assemblywoman from Queens, uh, Catalina Cruz. Assemblywoman Cruz, please just introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chairwoman. My name is Catalina Cruz, and I represent Jackson Heights, Corona, and Amherst, and a couple of other neighborhoods in Queens, New York. Glad to be here sharing space with amazing leaders to talk about immigration.
So when we talk about collaboration, it's two great organizations that have joined us. So we first have Miss Rosie Wang. Rosie?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I'm Rosie Wang. I'm a program manager at the Vera Institute of Justice, where I've been for 5 years now. Thank you so much for having me.
And we have another great Haitian on the line. Is Stephanie there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you so much, Assemblywoman and Chair. I am Stephanie Delia. I am currently the Executive Director of Little Haiti BK, but prior to that, I was the Managing Attorney for CUNY Citizenship Now Immigration Program for about 9 years, and I've been an immigration attorney for about 11.
So I thank all the work that you do. And, let's just talk about the elephant in the room. Right now, our communities are under attack, especially our immigrant neighbors. And so tell me, what are you seeing on the ground? What are you hearing on the ground?
Chairwoman, I will say from my part of Brooklyn, a lot of fear is circulating, uncertainty. People are just not sure of either um, what their status will be in the next year. I do have a good amount of Haitians that do live in my district that, were granted access to the United States to the temporary protective status, TPS, and they're not sure what will come later. People who are currently living in the United States, been living here for years, decades, that have raised families, participated in our economy, that's not sure of whether they're allowed to stay or go. And then this is having impacts on whether or not they send their children to school. I've also been getting reports that ICE, along with NYPD, are stations on various corners, not necessarily just not in my district, but also places that people who live in my district frequent. So if you're on, you regularly get your groceries on Newkirk, you are affected if you see ICE standing on the corner. And so that ever presence, the unending stream of executive orders just doesn't make people feel comfortable and it's affecting their daily lives.
I would like to add to that. I agree with everything Rosie just mentioned. I'm seeing the exact same thing, and I couldn't agree more about the impact of the fear. But in addition to the children being afraid of schools, I have been doing walkthroughs in the community. One, you can see the difference when you walk down Flatbush and Newkirk and Nostrand. You see these areas and these corridors that used to be bustling and packed that just have so much less people. And when I speak to the business owners, a lot of them are suffering financially because the clients and the people that frequent the businesses are afraid to come out too. So I just wanted to add that caveat to that.
Absolutely. One of the things, that we're seeing in Jackson Heights is many of the restaurants suffering, seeing less customers, seeing sometimes some of their own employees afraid to come to work. We're also seeing a lot of misinformation here in Corona and in Jackson Heights. We see lots of law enforcement for different reasons. There had been for a long time a concerted effort to come after our street vendors. And sometimes, they would do these operations and everyday folks don't necessarily understand the difference between Homeland Security investigation and their role, or ICE and their role, or other law enforcement agencies and their role. And there's a lot of confusion because what we have heard is many many stories of ICE being in public locations, and then it turned out not to be ICE. So what that did for us was put into clear perspective the need for education. We have been working with our federal and state and city colleagues to go out into the community with several of the nonprofits to do lots of know your rights, provide the little cards, even show people examples in real life pictures of what ICE should look like, or their uniform should look like versus other agencies. That's not to say that they won't use, as they used to do in the late 90s and early 2000s, they would use uniforms of other agencies with the word ICE right below, the word police, so as to confuse people. So lots of misinformation, lots of education to be done, and a clear impact out on the streets with the number of people that we're now seeing not come out.
So I'm grateful to the two lawmakers on the line because, not only do we have the power of our voice, but we also have the power of the pen. So what right now are some legislative initiatives that are being proposed that we could do as a legislature to protect our immigrant brothers and sisters?
I can talk to you about, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to actually say, as the chair of the Task Force of New Americans, I know that we have amazing bills, and many of them are sponsored by Assemblymember Cruz. So I think she should kick it off. That's what I was going to say.
Thank you, darling. I'm very grateful for your work. Farah, you have done a fantastic job leading the task force. I'm actually very glad you kept it so that you can help us and support us in the work that we do. I have two right now that we are pushing forward because especially, with the budget being around the corner, we need to make sure that we are investing in creating capacity for legal services as well as the right to legal services. So we have the Build Act, which would help us create the capacity. In places like Batavia and upstate New York, you have a lot of need for legal services for immigrant communities, but you don't have actual lawyers, actual nonprofits that have that level of capacity needed. And this is legislation that, and I use Batavia just as an example, but this is happening all over the state. The Build Act would actually help create the capacity to bring in more lawyers, to support more social safety net services that go along with legal services. And with that, it's the sister bill that would create the right to counsel in immigration proceedings, so that anyone who is confronting being ripped away from the country they love and the family that they love could have a lawyer to defend their rights while they're in civil immigration proceedings. Because unfortunately, what happens is you are facing your entire life being torn apart, but it's a civil matter, so you don't have the right to an attorney. So you either get really lucky after waiting on a wait list to get a lawyer, or you somehow come up with $10,000. And what we want to make sure is that neither of those things happen, and you actually have the right to an attorney.
The other bills that we're pushing for is New York for all. With ICE raids and scare tactics, it's just wreaking devastation in our communities because people feel now they're isolated. And so, because of this, many immigrant New Yorkers and their families live with anxiety in interacting, whether it's at a police stop, at a police traffic stop, attending school, going to work, or visiting a hospital. And so Senator Gennardis and Assemblymember Reyes put out an amazing bill, New York for All, which helped New Yorkers not be afraid to step out and seek the things that they need and make sure that New York dollars cannot be diverted to carry out cruel politicized immigration tactics. And of course, the task force pushes for increased funding for the very vital things that we need. So one of the things is that we need $165 million in new funding for the Office of New Americans and the Department of Education for immigrant legal services and infrastructure. Where Black and brown people, caucus members and who they represent, can be targeted by deportation proceedings. And so in making sure that we are getting legal representation to protect our due process, it really affirms New York's commitment to safeguarding immigrant communities. So, these are some of the things that we're fighting for. We're fighting for the dollars. We're fighting for these amazing bills sponsored by amazing legislators who really are trying to, tackle this crisis that we have here.
I know. Catalina, did you mention your Build Act?
I did. It's the bill that would create the capacity to actually deliver on the immigrant legal services. Yes.
Because that's a huge problem. I know many people are saying that we need to build capacity. And so, I just want to dive a little bit deeper into that. Can we, how does that look like across the state? And what more can we do, like constituents can do, and New Yorkers do to get that across the finish line?
No, and I can, I'm going to chime in, but I'll pass it to Rosie in a minute because she can tell us what they're seeing on the ground. What I keep on hearing over and over from attorneys, especially in areas in upstate New York where we do have detention facilities, is that they'll have a client in a facility, and I use Batavia again because that's where we have one of the detention facilities, but their office might be 3-4 counties over. And it's not like down here in New York City where, you have one county right next to the other. And it might take you 20-30 minutes by car. In upstate New York, you might be spending 3 hours trying to get to your client and then another 3 hours trying to get back. And you might be the only attorney in that area. And so, we don't have enough attorneys, and the ones that we do have are overworked and underpaid. And what the Build Act would do is invest millions of dollars in ensuring that we actually have a system, because we can't set up the system with and have it failed. We're actually going to set up a system to make sure that the attorneys who are there are supported, and that we're bringing in new attorneys and creating strong systems to ensure that when we do get the right to representation in place, we are successful.
And we at the Veer Institute are so grateful for Assemblymember Cruz's leadership on this, and see the Build Act as really needed. It was crafted in consultation with legal services providers across the state who gave their input on what their programs need to really strengthen and expand and be able to reach more people during this urgent time sustainably, and to both be able to respond to emerging urgent needs and be prepared for the long term and the additional attacks and the changes to the immigration landscape that we know are to come. And we were really concerned to hear that Yesterday, there was an announcement that the Delaney Hall Detention Center in Newark was going to reopen with a capacity of 1,000 people. That's right on our doorstep. It's going to be the largest detention center in the region, and it's indicative of the scale of attacks that are going to be planned and the number of New Yorkers who are going to be fighting for their lives in immigration court. So now more than ever, we really need these investments to make sure that we're equipping our legal service providers to deliver these services that are so needed and make a huge difference.
I would also like to just jump in quickly. First, Assemblymember Cruz, thank you so much. This is an incredible bill. I'm also a member of Halani, the Haitian American Lawyers Association. And I just wanted to add a quick caveat that a lot of the infinity bars are getting requests from immigrants who are terrified, and especially the Haitian community. They're always looking for the attorneys that they know practice immigration law in order to take on these cases. And one of the biggest issues we have is capacity. And even when we request attorneys, when we put out a request for assistance, it's really difficult to find attorneys who have the capacity and the time, in addition to all of the calls that they're getting for the private attorneys. The ones that are in the nonprofits are all completely overwhelmed also. So I just wanted to add that on a wider scale, I think a lot of the infinity bars, the Haitian American Lawyers Association, the Dominican Lawyers Association, Caribbean, et cetera, are all going to be excited to hear about this.
With this new federal administration, we are seeing the number of deportations skyrise. And Embassy has reported that ICE was able to arrest 1,200 migrants in a single day late last month. What is really troubling is that only 32% of these or who are deported were criminal arrests. So how can we ensure that families, everyday, individuals who are working hard, who are contributing to our society, feel safe despite this federal overreach?
The first and most important thing I think communities need to remember is that they still have rights. And sometimes when it comes to the being afraid, when you're surrounded by fear and people who are afraid and people who are panicking, you get misinformation and you believe that there is no hope. And so I think one of the things people need to understand is, one, they do have the right to remain quiet and not disclose information. Two, there is a lot of support in the community that they might not be aware of. Three, knowledge is power. So understanding what documents you should carry with you, what documents you should not carry with you, understanding what is your status and how does that affect your risk of deportation? So if you have TPS, even though for Haiti at least, even though it has been announced that the program is ending, your status is going to be valid between now and August 3rd. I've been expressing to people that there's a high likelihood that there's going to be a lawsuit specifically for Haiti. There's already one for Venezuela, and that probably is going to trigger an injunction, and that will impact when your actual status expires. I've been informing people to make sure that they get the most up-to-date records, speak to attorneys when possible, stay up to date regarding the rules, carry the cards with them that allows them to just give the card to ICE if they come into contact with ICE, which allows them to remain silent and not share their information. And so I think right now, just understanding the facts, understanding your legal status, making sure that you carry the right information with you is crucial. And on the other side of that is the children. A lot of my work recently has been trying to get the information out to parents of both documented and undocumented children living in the US about how to ensure they're having the right conversations. So if your child is undocumented, as hard as it is, that child needs to have the conversation with you now, even if they're in elementary, and they need to understand what that means for them. If your child is a US citizen and you're undocumented, then you should be preparing emergency steps, but also deciding what do you want done if you are deported and your child has an option. I know that was vague and I know that was a mouthful, but I'm going to stop right here and pass it over to Rosie.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. I think that's all incredibly important. I want to underscore and go back to the importance of legal representation as a really, really crucial form of protection right now. Statistics show that people with lawyers in immigration court can win their cases at up to 10 and a half times the rate of people who aren't represented. And at this time when these attacks are escalating, our response has to escalate as well. And here in New York State, we're lucky because we actually already have really important programs that exist because New York State stood up to the first Trump administration and publicly funded deportation defense and was the first actually state in the whole country to do that and led the way so that 50 jurisdictions, including 10 other states right now, also do public funding of these deportation defense programs. Assemblywoman, you mentioned that New York is a beacon of hope, and it really is. And, New York's leadership is really needed right now to pass the Access to Representation Act, the BUILD Act, and $165 million in immigration legal services funding and infrastructure to really ensure that people can defend their rights in immigration court and can have that much, much higher chance of being able to stay in the country with their homes, in their homes with their families, at their workplaces. And, this really matters for all New Yorkers. It impacts us all. And so, I would really want to also echo the call to really, call your representatives and help ensure that families are safe by telling them to support these really important policy and budget solutions.
And I know that your two great organizations are on the ground doing a lot. And I just want to make sure to highlight and give you an opportunity to talk about that. So between the Verner Institute and the Haitian lawyers, like, what are your organizations doing today?
So I'm the executive director of Little Haiti BK. We recently have started doing Know Your Rights info sessions. Our Know Your Rights info sessions right now are created specifically for the small business owners and individuals who serve immigrants and undocumented folks or in immigrant communities where there are a lot of undocumented people. And the core, the substance really speaks to what to say, how to create private and public space. What does it mean to be in a sanctuary city? Is your space considered public? What information, do you need to know about your staff, et cetera? There's a lot of information available for the immigrants themselves, but I have found that this particular a subsection of the people who are interacting with the immigrants, I want to make sure that they're aware of how to interact with ICE. So that's one thing Little Haiti BK is doing. Halani, the Haitian American Lawyers Association, right now we are showing up to Know Your Rights sessions. We are doing them virtually only in order to avoid gathering a group of undocumented people in a room because we are concerned about that information getting out and then attracting the wrong type of, the wrong person. So with that said, Holani has been active, and all of the attorneys who practice immigration have been regularly participating in Know Your Rights info sessions in partnership with the churches and some nonprofit organizations. Additionally, currently, Little Haiti BK is partnering with some other nonprofit organizations that serve mostly the Haitian immigrant community as well as the Latino Haitian immigrant community to determine how to combine our resources so that we can start responding on a broader scale. With that, I'll pass it over to Rosie.
The Vera Institute is a policy advocacy research organization. So during this time, we're really focusing on being in close conversation with our legal services provider partners and community partners across the state so we can help uplift their needs and their stories. And also track trends and legal developments, which, we know are coming very quickly and are very concerning to understand how they impact the immigrant community, their rights, and their access to representation. And finally, our research team analyzes data about immigration detention, about representation, with the new administration, this data has become much more opaque. Databases that used to sort of gather and analyze this information have gone dark. And we know that the information that ICE itself offers is not reliable. We have a detention dashboard and a representation dashboard to try to keep track of what's happening and keep eyes on what they're doing so that we can respond and fight back.
And I thank you so much for all that you're doing to really give hope to New Yorkers. And so, I just want to give everyone an opportunity to say maybe, some last minute words of encouragement or advice or advocacy. This is your time and space. So I'll first kick it off to Rosie, and then we'll go to Stephanie, and then we'll go to our colleagues.
Yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think that this is just a very critical moment for New York State to stand up for its immigrant communities. It matters for us all. It matters to keep our communities and families together. It matters to the New York economy. It matters for protecting due process rights and the rule of law that affect all of us. This is, sort of a watershed moment where we really, need to show leadership and lead the way for the rest of the country once more and really stand up for immigrant communities.
First and foremost, I agree with everything Rosie just said. It is crucial that we stand together in this moment. I do want to really thank the leadership. Assemblymember, you are an incredible beacon in that light, and making sure you bring us together and being a representative for what it looks like when we fight back is crucial. I think in addition to the policy work, it has to be an all hands on deck kind of moment. And so if I could say anything, it is that when they attack immigrants in New York City, they are attacking New Yorkers. New York City is unique in that the immigrant community is a part of our culture. It is what makes us great. It is what makes us one of the best cities to come to. And I think it's crucial that we do not allow the federal government to divide us, because New York is unique in that way. And so if I could say anything, it's just remember that we are one. And as New Yorkers, this fight is a New Yorkers fight, and standing up for each other and backing each other up and supporting each other in this moment, in my opinion, is the only way we make it. And I think we can.
I think what I would say is, for folks who are listening, everyday New Yorkers who are listening, the biggest way in which you can support not only the work that we're doing at the legislature, but also your immigrant neighbors. One is get yourself a ton of the Know Your Rights cards. The New York Immigration Coalition has them. Our different offices have them. You can find them online, and always carry them. And if you meet someone who happens to be, even if they're a permanent resident, even if they have some form of status like TPS, all of those things are in danger right now. Give them a card, pass along the information that no matter how long you spent in the country, 5 minutes or 50 years, the Constitution protects you. And these cards are the best way to do that. Also, make sure that if you ever encounter walk up on an ICE encounter, you have the right to record. Make sure that you are doing your part in your civic duty as a neighbor to protect people, because you never know. And become, inform yourself with your own rights. They have stopped U.S. citizens. They even took a veteran in during a raid. So just don't assume that because you have citizenship that you are safe. Make sure you are informed and you know your rights, and share those with your neighbors. And when it comes to the legislature, find out if your local senator or assembly member is signed on to any of the bills we've discussed here. And if they're not, call them and urge them to sign on. Because while the federal government might be attacking our immigrant communities, we at the state level are working very hard to protect them, and there is a lot that we can do. We do not have our hands tied completely, but we need your help to make sure we can get this done.
I would echo all the words of Catalina. And if you understand one thing is that this is a time to show up for each other, because from what our new administration has shown is that by dividing, they're really coming for us all. So once they come for one, they come for all. And this is not rehearsal. This is the time to show up. And the stronger we stand together, the more we can accomplish.
This wraps up this episode of the BPHA Caucus podcast. Thank you for tuning in and continuing the conversation on policy and issues that impact our communities. Stay connected with the BPH Caucus by following us on social media and visiting our website for updates on our legislative work and upcoming events. If you found today's conversation valuable, be sure to share this episode and subscribe so you never miss an update. Until next time, let's keep pushing for progress and equity for all New Yorkers. Thank you for listening.